Hello everyone, Mark here. I thought I'd share with you a story, and it's not very long, so if you've got yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or you're doing some ironing, then maybe this is a bit of food for thought. And so I'm just going to read it as it is. It's from a book by William Setner and Joan Setner, and it's called Questions for Jehovah's Witnesses. Excellent book, and I would strongly recommend it. What I'll do is I'll put the link and the ISBN number on the link so that you can purchase a copy of this. It's under World Religions and Cults, and also within this book it covers a great many subject matters, including scriptural ones, which I found very, very interesting. And you've got this graph on the back here that's very simply put, but what it is a circular motion of scriptures with comparisons to the Old and New Testament, and whether or not Jesus is actually Yahweh. And in my view, it's emphatic. But of course, we've all got our own opinions. But what's good about it is this little chart on the back is that you can read the scriptures yourself, if you're that way inclined, once you've left the organisation, to discover whether or not there are some real comparisons here between Jesus being Yahweh, based on the scriptures within the Bible. Anyway, I digress. Let's have a look at this story. As I said, it's not very long. Charles de Wilder is the title. Charles de Wilder died on a park bench after 4 decades of faithful service. 40 years. Died on a park bench. Okay. I'll just read it as William. Bill is commonly to his friends as was known. And this is what Bill had to say. One of the tragic episodes which unfolded during my service at Watchtower headquarters concerned Charles de Wilder. Charlie, as we called him, had deserted from the cavalry after World War I, and in looking for a job he had walked into headquarters and asked for work. He was told that he could have a job, but that the pay was only room and board and $20 a month. He took the offer and had worked for over 30 years by the time I met him. By now, Charlie was an old man and a little senile, but still a very hard worker. President Knorr offered him as an example of how much work could be accomplished. He had been the best bookbinder on the 4th floor. Okay, so we've got a picture of who Charles de Wilder is. A very hard worker. And he's put 30 years in by the time Bill gets there, into Bethel. Best bookbinder on the 4th floor as well, according to Mr. Knorr. Well, Charlie, like all other Bethel workers, was not allowed to get married. If he wished to remain in Bethel, Knorr had often stressed this policy and Charlie resented it. But in 1953, in violation of the rule, President Knorr married Audrey Mock, one of the sisters at Bethel. After the marriage, Charlie went to President Knorr and told him that he had broken his own rule and that he ought to resign. Ouch. You can imagine. You could hear a pin drop if anybody was in that room when Charles de Wilder said that. He also said to him, "You preach more about love than anyone in the world I know, but practice it least." Ouch. Charlie's in a world of hurt from this point onwards, I guess. Well, as punishment for this confrontation, Charlie was removed from his assigned seat in the dining hall and placed in a remote corner. I'm presuming, like a naughty boy. The excuse for this was that he had used foul language. It was obvious that he was being punished. He refused to stay in this new seat and returned to his usual table. It was made so difficult for him at Bethel that he packed his few belongings and walked out into the outside world. Bethel had been his entire life. He even spent his vacations there. He didn't know where he was going, and he had no place to go, but to him anything was better than Bethel at the time. I met him later. He was staying in a horrible flop house of 50 cents a night. After he ran out of funds, he began to ask Bethel workers and other witnesses for money to buy meals. He was hungry. Don't forget, he's also elderly. I gave him some to meet his need. Bethel workers were told by N.H. Knorr not to give Charlie any money. And a letter saying the same thing was sent out from headquarters to congregations in the area. This was an effort to force him to return. You're seeing a pattern here. The last I heard was that Charles de Wilder had died on a park bench. This is the reward a man gets after 4 decades of faithful service in God's organisation, because he pointed out an obvious inconsistency. This was one example that revealed to me how little love there really was at headquarters for the people working there. It is interesting that Judge Rutherford, the second president of JW's, had a reputation for having a foul mouth. It may have been a good idea to put him in the corner of the dining room for a while. And that's the end of that particular experience. Charles de Wilder, you're not forgotten wherever you are now. You're immortalised in this book, and your story will probably be told many, many times over for lots of reasons. But you're a faithful man who happened to point out, as they've said, an obvious inconsistency. One rule for everybody else and one rule for me. And he paid the price for that. Banishment within the Bethel until it became almost impossible for him, followed by him walking out the door with his bags, not knowing where he's going next. Quite incredible for an old man to be doing that at his age, with no support, no money, just out there on a whim. But that probably was a much more relieved position for him than being stuck in that isolation of the buildings of Bethel, being shunned and put through the mill. Very sad indeed. I'll stop there, but the reason that I see from that particular story, the core message is there's no love in it. Our experiences and that of all of our friends and everybody we know shows quite clearly that when it comes to the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, there is no real love within it. It is all conditional, not unconditional. And that's the big difference with this organisation. Didn't Jesus say, you'll know my true disciples because they'll have love among themselves? Well, for Charles de Wilder, I'm sure if he was sat next to me now, he'd have a very different story to tell about the true meaning of love, wouldn't he, Watchtower? Okay, thanks for listening, and bye for now.